Hello, and welcome to the Megan Taylor Creator Podcast, a show for entrepreneurs looking to grow their business with digital marketing. In this episode, I'll be sharing with you my top tips on how you can start managing multiple marketing campaigns for your clients. Let's get started. In this episode of the Megan Taylor Creator Podcast, I wanted to sit and talk to you about, I guess I'm specifically talking to agency owners here, but I wanted to specifically sit down and talk about how to manage multiple campaigns for your clients, because I feel like once you actually start getting clients, it can be really overwhelming to understand exactly what it is that you need to do in order to streamline your process and manage multiple campaigns. It can be quite a lot to do, especially if you've got quite a lot of clients and you've got a minimal team as well. And I also find that clients that want to use different softwares, different CRMs, or if they have like different social media scheduling tools that you need to have access to, it can be really difficult to manage all of that information and make sure that everything goes out according to plan. So that's what I wanted to talk about in this episode. I have quite a lot of experience managing large scale campaigns, but also large scale campaigns for multiple clients at one given time. So I thought for aspiring agency owners, this would be a really interesting episode if you're a little bit overwhelmed right now, or you're just starting out and you have no idea how to actually manage this process when you finally get clients. My first tip for managing multiple client campaigns at any given time is to have a streamlined onboarding process. And this is the one part of your campaign life cycle that you can actually control. It's very rare that you will get a client who doesn't already have softwares that they use and want you to use as well. So in that aspect, you're not in control of it. But if you streamline your onboarding process, then any information you get from your clients in the early days, you're going to have, and it's going to be easy for you to get hold of them because it's all going to be in one place. I personally like to use a mixture of just Google Forms or Notion. Google Forms is a really valuable source for business owners who need to get information from clients quickly and efficiently without having to spend money. There are obviously a lot more advanced survey platforms that you can use, such as Typeform, to get that information. And some would argue that the way that Typeform works, for example, and other Typeform alternatives, you can get that information in a really organic way, whereas Google Forms, I think clients can sometimes be put off by it, and I have had experiences where I've had to encourage the client to fill it out because they don't think it's important, but it is important for me because it's got information on there like, are you happy for us to have access to this, and GDPR stuff. But then also there's more practical elements such as the client actually giving us access to their social media accounts or WordPress account or whatever it is. So that is actually really important. But at least if you have it all in one place, you can quickly review the client's answers. So say, for example, if you completely recache your Google Chrome, which is what I use, the browser that I use, and all of your passwords have completely gone, at least then you can go back and check the client passwords so you're not logged out. There might obviously be instances such as with Instagram, where when you're first logging in, you need a code from the account holder. So like a code will be sent to the account holder's mobile or email address, which I've had issues with previously because I've had clients that are on the other side of the world, specifically in the States. So obviously there's a time difference there and we're not always overlapping in terms of our schedule and things like that. But hopefully the next couple of tips that I give you will actually help you kind of get around that frustration anyway. But yeah, just have a streamlined onboarding process. Know what kind of questions you want to ask, know the deliverables up front, be able to manage the expectations of your clients, and then it will be a lot easier to actually start executing whatever project it is that you're working with them on. My next tip, and this obviously depends on whether what you do as an agency, but if you are a digital marketing agency, for example, then you may want to particularly pay attention to this tip, and that is to have a streamlined content strategy process. And content strategy is one of the things that it shouldn't take a lot of time, but it shouldn't take a long time, but it does, because a lot of the time clients may be indifferent about their opinions of your content strategy and you need to go over it with them, or they can just take a while to get back to you because again they don't see that as that important. They just want you to get on with the deliverables, but at the end of the day a campaign is not a good campaign without a solid strategy, in my opinion. And I had an instance with a client where he felt like the content strategy that I had delivered was not aligned with the client's purpose. But when I spoke to the client at the second time, they seemed really happy with the content. And then we found that even though we went over the actual content strategy multiple times, and I'm talking quite a few months here, it's actually the original ideas were more aligned than they thought. And I think that this actually is an example of how important it is to have a streamlined process, because we tried to create a streamlined process together that was specifically suited for their client, and it was very different to the process that I would normally use. So that's where a lot of the confusion on their part came from, because I obviously had to adapt, and that's obviously a big part of running an agency. Sometimes you don't have control over the project, and that's totally fine. But I think the problem became when their reasoning behind the content not being aligned was not, well, it just didn't really have any weight to it. I think that's the best way that I can put it. And actually, that client relationship ended largely because of that experience. On my part, I had to end the relationship with that client because I just felt like they didn't trust me and they didn't trust my ability to create content, even though what I was saying, they actually were coming up with similar ideas when they tried to create the content strategy for their client, and it became a bit of a mess, to be honest. So now that I've had that experience, anytime that I get a content strategy client, I really want to streamline the process as much as possible. And a big part of that is obviously doing things like creating templates so that you know exactly what element to put in your content strategy and you have a thought out method for actually getting to that content strategy. And a big part of that is the document, because you can easily follow along and write down all of the things that you need to know in order to get to the conclusion of what content strategy would be right for that client. So yeah, it's just that experience alone, I hope, kind of highlighted to you just how important actually having a streamlined content strategy process really is, because I find that a lot of the bottlenecks in projects, and this goes back years now, a lot of the bottlenecks in projects that I've had with clients are down to the strategy and not the actual content itself. I think a lot of people have opinions on strategy and they think they have ideas, but at the end of the day, if they're going to ask a content strategist to help them, it can be quite frustrating for them then not to trust that the content strategist knows what they're doing and has a reasoning behind the content strategy. Another top tip that I have for you as far as managing client projects and multiple client projects in one go is to encourage your clients to use one CMS if possible. Now, again, this isn't always possible. I've had client projects where I've been using WordPress and HubSpot, for example, at the same time, and then also Squarespace. So that's, 3 different CMS platforms that I have to learn. Luckily, I'm at that point in my career where I'm pretty comfortable with all of the major CMS that's available, but it can be tricky to almost kind of like remember which client is which sometimes, because obviously you're managing so much that sometimes your brain is like on an overload. So my main client right now is currently using HubSpot, so I know that, which is good. But say, for example, if I got another client and they wanted to use Squarespace or Wix, or they had their own web hosting platform that's bespoke, that they've gotten from, I don't know, like a web designer or something like that, then I would have to learn that and remember that. And I think just having access to multiple websites on one CMS is just really, really helpful because you can manage all of the websites you have access to from that dashboard. So it's a really good idea to just encourage clients, if they've not yet got a website, to use a specific web host that you already have a lot of clients with. But this also helps for things like when you're optimizing content, for example. A big part of what we do at Megan Taylor Creative is SEO content. And so a big part of that is us having to optimize the client's articles through the CMS. And each CMS, I've noticed, has different ways in which you optimize your content. Obviously, it's generally the same kind of practices, but I more mean that the user interface is slightly different and you have to kind of find things. And again, luckily, I'm in that point in my career now where I'm pretty comfortable with most mainstream CMSs anyway. But if you're not, it can be really good to help you get used to kind of managing content campaigns by just getting used to one CMS. And then over time, you'll start to learn typically what developers like to use, UX designers like to use, and the sort of interfaces that come along with CMSs, because there are obviously a lot of parallels too. But if you do get a lot of like younger clients, for example, like me, I have a lot of younger clients who don't necessarily have a website and are thinking about starting one and just need help kind of setting it up, or they're completely redoing their website and are open to switching web hosts, then I would highly recommend and encourage them to kind of use a platform that you're comfortable with and that you already kind of are managing client websites on, so that it's a lot easier to manage all of those websites at once. So, my last top tip, as far as practical tips for managing campaigns, is to actually get a social media scheduling tool. And one of the things that I do on my onboarding form is basically get the client to tick whether they're happy for us to put their account on our social media scheduling platform. And normally they say yes because, they trust us, so they're happy for us to do whatever we want. I've not really had any friction with that. And also, I think it's quite common knowledge that there are these social media scheduling tools. I suppose I've had clients say, is this a trusted social media scheduling tool? Because obviously there's some that are vetted by the main social media platforms, and those are the ones that you want to be using. You don't want to be using any third-party social media scheduling tools that aren't recognized, because that can actually negatively impact your clients' content on social media. But generally speaking, most clients are pretty happy for you to do that. I think they know the value of having a social media scheduling tool because they've already got a social media manager. So they know that tools like that are just as important to helping them manage their marketing campaigns as their social media manager. And actually, it's more beneficial for them to have a social media scheduling tool. Obviously, you want to give them access to it. I would be careful with how much you allow them to actually edit the content. And this might sound a bit backwards, but again, similar to the content strategy experience that I had with one of my clients, I've not had experience with this personally, but I have heard other freelancers essentially have issues with the way that the client is editing any social media campaigns, because they'll edit things at the last minute, even when things have been posted, not realizing or not reviewing the content calendar, and that can obviously cause problems. So I would be upfront and honest and say, look, the content needs to be signed off at this specific time, and if you have a content sign-off date, which is what I do, they can make changes, but they have to basically be run by you first. If the content's already gone up, a lot of the time you can just make changes in the social media platform anyway, but I would advise against encouraging that as much as possible, because it can just create frictions and problems within the working relationship. And again, as far as passwords go and stuff, having something like LastPass is really useful. I find that a lot of the major social media platforms will just allow you to have access to, they'll just allow you to have access to an actual page rather than having to log into the client's account. You'll be able to have access directly via your profile, and your client can add you as an admin on there. But sometimes you may just need to go in, or you may want to go in so that you can edit the page directly, for example, or if you want to post stories directly on a client's Instagram account on your phone, for example. So having LastPass just allows you to manage all of those passwords because they can get quite intense. So yeah, that was it. That's everything that I have to share with you today. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. It was really fun to share my experience of managing a content marketing agency and also from working for a creative agency as well. A lot of these tips I picked up both agency side, just as a contractor, and for the agency that I run now. As always, if you liked this episode, please like the video on YouTube and subscribe to our channel so that you can be made aware of any new episodes. And as always, I will speak to you next week. Thank you for listening. Bye.